This is my true story. My son hid a large box under his bed, and one night when I opened it, I called the police. What I discovered that day destroyed my reality. Before that, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. And please subscribe to this channel so that my stories can reach more people. For 35 years, I served this country as a high-level diplomat, the man sent into the room when the world was on fire. I have looked warlords in the eye and negotiated peace treaties in the dead of night, navigating the most treacherous political minefields in the world. But now, at 67, my world has shrunk to the size of a spare bedroom in my son Marcus's house. What I thought was an act of familial love has become a calculated siege. My car keys were taken for my safety, my mail misplaced, and my opinions dismissed as the ramblings of a fading mind. They believe I am a piece of expiring furniture, a hollow vessel trapped in a declining state. They have no idea that behind my silent, practiced nods I am observing every slip-up and every lie. Tonight, I sit at the head of the mahogany dinner table, a seat I earned through 40 years of diplomatic service. But tonight, I'm just a ghost in a suit. The room smells of rosemary chicken and the expensive Cabernet I bought 3 years ago. My son Marcus pours himself a second glass without asking. Across from him, his wife Sarah picks at her salad, her eyes darting toward me with a mix of pity and impatience. They aren't talking to me. They are talking around me as if I'm a piece of furniture that has grown too bulky for the room. The facility in Silver Oaks has a bed opening on Monday, Sarah says. She doesn't look at me. She keeps her focus on the way she's cutting her lettuce. I checked the reviews. It's top tier. They have 24-hour monitoring. Marcus nods, his jaw working through a piece of steak. It's for the best, Sarah. He's getting forgetful. Last week he left the stove on. We can't take that risk anymore. I remember leaving the stove on. I did it to see if they were watching. I am not forgetful. I remember the exact wording of the 1994 trade agreements I brokered in Brussels. I remember the names of every double agent I handled in the 80s. But here, in my own house, I remain silent. I watch Marcus sip the wine I paid for with the pension he thinks he manages. Victor, did you hear that? Marcus asks, leaning forward. He uses the loud, slow voice people reserve for children or the broken. Silver Oaks. It's like a hotel, Dad. You'll love the garden. A garden, I repeat. My voice is thin, practiced. I make it shake just enough to satisfy his ego. Exactly, Marcus says, turning back to Sarah. See? He's agreeable. We'll start moving the heavy furniture out this weekend. We can list the house by the 1st of the month. The market is peaking. What about his library? Sarah asks. Marcus shrugs. Donate it. He doesn't read those old history books anymore. He just stares at the covers. I feel a cold, familiar pulse in my neck. It is the same calm I felt when I was negotiator-in-chief. They think I am a hollow vessel, a bank account with a heartbeat. They don't see that I am observing the way Marcus avoids my gaze. He isn't worried about my safety. He's worried about his overhead. He has lived in this house for 3 years, taking care of me while his own business ventures failed in silence. Dad, eat your peas, Marcus says. His voice drips with a fake sugary kindness that makes my skin crawl. You need your strength for the move. I look him directly in the eye. For a split second I let the ambassador show, the man who once stared down warlords. Marcus blinks, his fork hovering halfway to his mouth. A flicker of doubt crosses his face, a momentary fear that the old lion is still awake. Then I let it go. I give him a slow, empty nod and look down at the green circles on my plate. Thank you, Marcus, I whisper. You've thought of everything. I have, Dad, he says, relaxing back into his chair. I really have. He has no idea that while he's planning my exit, I am already documenting his. Let them think I'm a ghost. It makes it much easier to watch them. Marcus's smug reassurance about thinking of everything stayed with me long after the dinner plates were cleared. I watched from the window as he and Sarah drove off to their charity gala, dressed in clothes my money bought, leaving the senile old man to his silence. I am a man of order, and deep cleaning is how I clear my mind. I waited until their taillights vanished before heading toward Marcus's wing of the house. I tell myself I am looking for the silver watch he misplaced, but my gut trained by decades of counterintelligence, tells me otherwise. In his bedroom, the air smelled of his expensive cologne and unearned confidence. I knelt by his bed, my joints protesting, and reached into the darkness. My hand hit cold metal. I pulled out a heavy steel box, locked with a biometric scanner. Marcus is arrogant. He used my birthday as the backup pin. The lid clicked open. "What have you done, Marcus?" I whispered. 6 passports spilled onto the rug. I picked one up. The gold leaf of the eagle was authentic. I opened it to see my own face staring back, but the name read Arthur Vance. I opened another. Victor Dumont, Sloan Richards. All of them featured my recent ID photo, the one Marcus took for my facility application. Beneath the stack of identities lay the true nightmare. Ledger sheets for offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. The numbers were staggering. Millions of dollars were being routed through these accounts, using the names in the passports. "You used me," I said to the empty, shadowed room. My son wasn't just draining my retirement fund. He was using my dormant diplomatic clearance, a status that bypasses standard financial flags, to launder money for someone very dangerous. I saw the syndicate stamps on the wire transfers. If the authorities tracked the digital breadcrumbs, they wouldn't find Marcus. They would find a retired diplomat who appeared to be building a criminal empire in his twilight years. I sat on the floor, the weight of the betrayal pressing against my ribs. I had raised a parasite who didn't just want my house. He wanted me to be his human shield. He planned to tuck me away in a care facility while I unknowingly served as the fall guy for a global syndicate. I pulled out my phone and took a clear photo of every passport and every ledger page. My hands did not shake. In my line of work, you don't get angry. You get even. "I gave you life, Marcus," I murmured, clicking the steel box shut and sliding it back into the dust. "And you gave me a death sentence." I stood up, smoothed the wrinkles in my trousers, and walked out. The senile man was gone. The ambassador was back on the clock. The weight of the steel box was still fresh in my mind as I retreated to the shadows of my private study. Marcus and Sarah were likely sipping champagne by now, bragging about their philanthropy, while they plotted to bury me alive in a cage of my own identity. I didn't turn on the overhead lights. In my world, the most important work happens in the dark. I moved to the back of my bookshelf, pulling away a false row of encyclopedias. Behind them sat a small black burner phone. I kept it charged and ready, a relic from the days when my signature could end a blockade. I dialed a number that had never been written down. It didn't ring. It simply clicked open. "It's Victor," I said. My voice was no longer the thin whisper I used at the dinner table. It was lead and gravel. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "We thought you were dead, Mr. Ambassador, or at least retired beyond reach." "The reports of my demise are premature, Arthur," I replied. "I need a favor. I'm sending you a burst of data. I need these account numbers verified and the routing paths mapped. I want to know whose money my son is moving." "Give me 10 minutes," Arthur said. "And Victor, if this touches the people I think it touches, you're in a high wind zone. I've spent my life in the wind, Arthur. Just get it done." I hung up and paced the small room. My son thought he was a player. He thought he was clever because he knew how to use a laptop and a few forged documents. He didn't understand that I helped write the rules of the game he was playing. 10 minutes later, the burner buzzed. "It's bad, Victor." Arthur's voice was tight. "The money belongs to the Petrova Syndicate. They're using your old diplomatic credentials to bypass the Swiss filters. If this goes south, the feds will see your face on every transaction. Your son is setting you up for a life sentence." "I see," I said, my heart turning to ice. "And the total?" 12 million, give or take. It's sitting in a holding account right now, waiting for the final bounce." "Can you give me the digital key?" I asked. "I can. But Victor, once you touch that money, there's no going back. The syndicate will come for whoever has the ledger." "Let them come," I said. "I also need a flight. Malta, private, for tomorrow night." The door to my study suddenly creaked open. I slid the burner phone in my pocket as Marcus stepped in, silhouetted by the hallway light. He was loosening his tie, looking annoyed. "What are you doing in the dark, Dad?" he asked. His voice was sharp, lacking the fake sweetness from dinner. I told you to stay in your room. You're going to trip and break a hip, and then I'll have to deal with the paperwork. Just remembering the past, Marcus, I told him, sitting still in my leather chair. It's a quiet place. He laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. The past is gone. It doesn't exist. You need to start focusing on the future. I've already scheduled the movers for Monday. Try not to make a scene. He turned and left without waiting for a response. He treated me like a broken clock, something to be discarded once it stopped being useful. He had no idea that the clock had just started ticking for him. The cold indifference in Marcus's voice as he walked away stayed with me through the night, a reminder that the son I raised was long gone. I didn't sleep. I spent the early hours staring at the moon, waiting for the final insult that would bridge the gap between mercy and justice. The next morning I walked into the kitchen to the sound of Sarah laughing. She was holding a small, velvet-lined box. Inside was a gold watch, a vintage Patek Philippe. It had belonged to Martha, my late wife. It was the only thing I had left of her. We're selling this to cover your entry fee at the facility, Sarah said, not even looking up as I entered. It's just sitting in a drawer, Victor. It's better to use it for something practical. I felt a cold fire ignite in my chest. I kept my voice low, but the authority was there. That was Martha's. It's for my granddaughter. It is the only thing she asked for in her will. Marcus walked in, already dressed in a tailored suit. He snatched the watch from Sarah and tucked it into his pocket. You don't make the rules anymore, Victor. You're a liability, and this house is expensive to run. You've become a burden we can no longer carry. A burden? I asked. I stood my ground, my eyes locked on his. I paid for your education. I paid for this house. I even paid for that suit you're wearing. Marcus stepped into my personal space. He was taller, but he lacked the internal steel that comes from a life of service. He shoved me back toward my chair, his hand heavy on my chest. Just sit down and shut up. You're old, you're losing your mind, and you have nothing left. If I say we sell the watch, we sell the watch. You're lucky I'm not just dropping you at a bus station. I hit the chair with a dull thud. The physical disrespect was the final key turning in a lock. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I looked at the man who shared my blood and saw a stranger. I understand, I said. My voice was steady, a flat line of resolve. I won't say another word about it. Good, Marcus snapped, turning to Sarah. See? If you're firm with him, he listens. He's like a dog that needs to know who the master is. They began discussing the auction price of the watch over their coffee, ignoring me as I sat 3 feet away. They thought they had broken me. They thought the shove had put me in my place. In reality, it had simply removed the last shred of hesitation I had about destroying his life. I watched the clock on the wall. Every second that passed was another step toward his ruin. I'll be in my room, I said quietly. Fine, Marcus muttered without looking up. Just stay out of the way. We have people coming over to appraise the furniture at noon. I walked out of the room, my pace slow and deliberate. I had spent decades negotiating with monsters in foreign lands, and I had learned one universal truth. You never show your hand until the pot is full. Marcus thought he was the master. He was about to find out he was nothing more than a ghost in a machine he didn't control. The sting of Marcus's hand against my chest was still a cold, dull ache as I closed my bedroom door. It was the last time he would ever touch me. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. To anyone watching the security cameras Marcus had installed to monitor my safety, I looked like a confused old man squinting at a screen, perhaps struggling to find a game of solitaire. In reality, my fingers moved with the muscle memory of a man who once managed encrypted cables between embassies. I opened a secure browser and entered the digital keys Arthur had provided. The screen flickered, and then there it was, the Petrova Syndicate's laundering hub. $12 million sat in a holding account, disguised as a series of legitimate corporate dividends. $12 million, I whispered. The price of your soul, Marcus. I didn't hesitate. I didn't move the money to my own accounts. That was a mistake a common thief would make. I was a diplomat. I moved the funds with purpose. I rerouted every cent to the Sovereign Justice Fund. It was a Black Ops charity based in The Hague that focused on tracking and dismantling human trafficking rings, the very people Marcus was helping. I watched the progress bar crawl across the screen, transferring 50%, 80%, complete. The balance dropped to $0, the zero. I felt a grim satisfaction. The money was now in the hands of the hunters, and the trail led straight back to the Arthur Vance identity Marcus had created for me. "Now you are truly broke, Marcus," I muttered. I wasn't finished. I opened a new window and accessed a secure tip line for the federal police. I didn't use my name. I used the language of a high-level whistleblower. I attached the photos I had taken of the passports and the ledgers, along with a brief clinical note. Foreign intelligence asset operating at this address. Subject is using diplomatic covers to move syndicate capital. High risk of flight. I hit send. The digital ghost had done its work. The bait was set, the money was gone, and the predator was about to become the prey. I shut the laptop and leaned back. "Victor, are you coming out for lunch?" Sarah yelled through the door. Her voice was sharp, annoyed that she even had to ask. "I'm not hungry, Sarah," I replied, my voice perfectly fragile. "I think I'll just take a nap." "Fine by me," she scoffed. One less plate to wash. I listened to her footsteps fade away. They thought they were clearing out a house. They had no idea I was clearing out their lives. I closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to visualize the next move. In the game of power, the loudest person in the room is usually the most vulnerable. Marcus was screaming his dominance while I was silently erasing his existence. The digital trail I left behind was a ticking clock, its silent rhythm echoing in my head as I walked down to the dining room. This would be the last time I sat at this table. Marcus was already there, pouring a glass of scotch from the crystal decanter my colleagues had given me upon my retirement. He looked flushed, his eyes bright with a greedy excitement. He thought he was hours away from a massive payday. "To new beginnings," Marcus said, raising his glass toward Sarah. He didn't even look at me as I took my seat. The appraiser said the dining set alone is worth 5 figures. Everything is finally falling into place. He took a long, arrogant swallow of the whiskey. He was celebrating the commission he expected to receive once the 12 million moved. He treated me with a cruel pity now, his anger from the morning replaced by the smugness of a man who thinks he has already won. "Don't worry, Dad," he said, leaning back and gesturing with his glass. "They have a nice garden at the home. You can sit there all day and forget everything. No more stoves to leave on. No more books to clutter your head." I look at him across the table. I didn't see my son. I saw a failed man who had traded his honor for a syndicate's scraps. I allowed a small, thin smile to touch my lips. It was a smile that had once made dictators sweat in paneled rooms. "I hope you have a strong heart, Marcus," I said, my voice low and steady. "You'll need it for what's coming." Marcus paused, his glass halfway to his lips. He frowned, his brow furrowing in confusion. "What's that supposed to mean? Are you having another episode?" "It means the bill always comes due," I told him. I took a slow sip of water, watching him over the rim of the glass. In my experience, when things seem too perfect, that is exactly when the floor drops away. "You're talking nonsense again," Sarah snapped, waving a hand at me. "Marcus, ignore him. He's just trying to be dramatic because he's losing his audience." "You're right," Marcus said, though he kept his eyes on me for a second longer than usual. "The old man is just senile. Eat your soup, Victor. It's the last home-cooked meal you're getting." I went back to my meal, the silence of the room heavy with things they couldn't possibly understand. I wasn't the one losing my audience. I was the one closing the theater. I watched them laugh and plan their future with my money, knowing that by dawn they would be pleading with people who don't accept apologies. The silence of the house after dinner felt like the holding of a breath before a storm. I stood in my room, watching the digital clock on the bedside table. 2 a.m. In the world of diplomacy and shadows, this is the hour of truth. I grabbed my small, battered leather suitcase, the one that had traveled with me from Berlin to Beirut. It held only the essentials, my real passport, the folder of evidence I had printed, and a single framed photo of Martha. I moved through the hallway like a shadow. I am 78, but the muscle memory of a field operative never truly leaves the marrow of your bones. I reached the kitchen and paused at the island. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the 6 forged passports and the empty ledger sheets. I fanned them out across the marble counter, right under the pendant light. I wanted them to be the first thing the federal police saw when they breached the perimeter. A pair of headlights cut through the darkness outside, sweeping across the living room walls. A black sedan pulled up to the curb with no lights on. My extraction had arrived. I looked up at the stairs leading to Marcus's bedroom. He was sleeping soundly, likely dreaming of the millions he thought were sitting in a Cayman account. He was so convinced of my frailty that he hadn't even bothered to lock his door. I felt a momentary pang of the father I used to be, but it was quickly replaced by the cold reality of the man he had become. "Goodbye, Marcus," I whispered to the empty air. "I hope the facility you picked for me has a good legal library. You're going to need it." I stepped out into the cool night air, the door clicking shut behind me with a finality that echoed in my chest. My contact, a man named Merrick, whom I had saved from a Sarajevo prison decades ago, stood by the rear door of the sedan. He didn't say a word. He simply nodded and opened the door. "Where to, sir?" he asked as I slid into the leather seat. "The airport, Merrick. I have a 4 a.m. flight to Valletta, private terminal." As the car pulled away, I didn't look back at the house. A home is built on respect and blood. Without the first, the second is just a liability. I checked my watch. The real one, not the one Marcus stole. The police would be arriving in exactly 3 hours. By the time they realized the secret boss was actually a retired diplomat halfway across the Atlantic, Marcus would be in handcuffs, and the syndicate would be looking for a head to put on a pike. "Is everything prepared on the other side?" I asked. "Your villa is ready, Mr. Ambassador," Merrick replied, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror. "And the local authorities in Malta have been briefed that a high-level asset is arriving for extended consultation." I leaned back and closed my eyes. For the first time in 3 years, I felt the weight of the invisible man lift from my shoulders. The hunt was over. My retirement was finally beginning. The hum of the private jet's engines provided a soothing white noise as I sat in the first-class cabin, a glass of sparkling water at my side. I didn't need alcohol to steady my nerves. The mission was already in motion. I opened my tablet and synced it to the hidden nanny cam I had installed in the living room weeks ago, a precaution Marcus never suspected, because he believed I couldn't even operate a television remote. The screen flickered to life. It was 5:00 a.m. back at the house. Suddenly, the front door vanished in a cloud of splinters and dust. "Federal police! Hands in the air!" The shout echoed through the tablet's speakers. I watched as Marcus stumbled into the hallway in his silk pajamas, blinking against the harsh glare of tactical flashlights. He looked small, confused, and utterly terrified. Behind him, Sarah was screaming, her hands over her face as officers in body armor swarmed the stairs. "What is this? There's been a mistake!" Marcus yelled, his voice cracking. "My father! He's the one you want! He's senile! He's been doing things!" I triggered the final part of my plan. I sent a single encrypted text message to Marcus's phone. On the screen, I watched him reach for his device on the kitchen island, right next to the fanned-out forged passports. An officer shoved him against the counter, but Marcus managed to glance at the screen. The message read, "Check the account, son. You wanted to play the man? Now you play the fall guy. I am the one who built this world. You just lived in it." I watched his face go through a spectrum of horror. He looked down at the passports, the evidence he had carefully crafted to frame me, and then at the lead agent, who was already bagging them. Marcus's knees buckled. He realized in that instant that the ghost had been the architect of his ruin. He wasn't the master of the house. He was a tenant who had been evicted by the landlord. "Where is Victor?" the agent barked, grabbing Marcus by the collar. "Where is the man on these passports?" He's gone," Marcus whispered, his bravado vanishing like smoke. I watched the lead agent pick up one of the passports. "These are high-quality forgeries, kid. And the offshore logs on your laptop show 12 million moved just hours ago. You've been busy." "The money is gone?" Marcus shrieked. No, that's impossible. It was right there." I felt a cold, clinical sense of justice. He had tried to steal my dignity and my freedom to line his pockets. Now he had neither. He looked at the camera lens for a brief second, almost as if he could feel my eyes on him from across the ocean. I saw the moment the realization hit. I had never been forgetful. I had been waiting. "Get him out of here," the agent ordered. I closed the tablet. I didn't need to see the handcuffs click shut. I looked out the window at the clouds beneath us, glowing orange with the rising sun. The alpha isn't the one who shouts the loudest. It's the one who is still standing when the noise stops. The transition from the quiet cabin of the jet to the chaos on my screen was jarring. As Marcus was forced into the back of a police cruiser, his phone began to vibrate violently on the kitchen counter. I watched through the camera as an officer picked it up, frowning at the display. It was an encrypted call from a blocked number. The Petrova Syndicate was calling for their money. "Answer it," the lead agent commanded, shoving the phone back into Marcus's shaking hands as they stood on the lawn. "Tell them exactly what happened to their 12 million. Marcus looked at the device as if it were a live grenade. He knew the police were a threat to his freedom, but the voice on the other end of that phone was a threat to his life. I watched his face go pale, his skin turning a sickly shade of gray under the flashing blue lights. He was trapped in the very cage he had built for me. I can't," Marcus whimpered. "They'll kill me. Please, it was my father." "He's a diplomat. He knows how to move things. He must have taken it." The lead agent laughed, a cold and mocking sound that cut through the morning air. "Your father is a decorated hero of the State Department, kid. We checked his records the moment the tip came in. He hasn't touched a bank account in 3 years. You, on the other hand, have the offshore keys on your personal laptop and 6 fake identities with your father's face on them. You were going to let a 78-year-old man take the fall for a syndicate hit. You're not just a criminal, Marcus. You're a coward." "No, you don't understand," Marcus screamed, his voice reaching a frantic, high-pitched break. "He's the secret boss. He's played you all." "The only thing he's played is his role as a victim of a parasitic son," the agent replied. He signaled to his team. "Take him in, secure the wife for questioning, and find out where that money went. Though I have a feeling it's somewhere you'll never see again." I watched as Sarah was led out in handcuffs, her expensive nightgown stained with the dust of the breach. She was weeping, her charity gala persona stripped away to reveal a desperate, greedy woman who had bet on the wrong horse. Marcus was shoved into the car, his head hitting the frame. He looked toward the house one last time, the house he had already tried to sell, and I saw the absolute brokenness in his eyes. He had lost the money. He had lost the house. He had lost the syndicate's protection. And most importantly, he had lost the father he thought he could control. I reached out and tapped the screen, closing the feed. I didn't need to watch the interrogation. I didn't need to hear the sentencing. The climax of his life had been reached, and he had failed the final test. I signaled the flight attendant and ordered a glass of 18-year-old scotch. As the amber liquid hit the glass, I felt a profound sense of stillness. The mission was accomplished. The threat was neutralized. I leaned back into the soft leather of my seat, finally allowing the tension of the last few weeks to evaporate into the thin air of the stratosphere. The roar of the jet engines has been replaced by the rhythmic, gentle lap of the Mediterranean against the limestone cliffs of Valletta. I sit on the balcony of my villa, the white linen of my shirt fluttering in a warm, salt-kissed breeze. For 3 years I was a ghost in a house that smelled of betrayal. Today I am a man who can finally breathe. I pick up my phone and scroll through the morning headlines. One story dominates the international section. Ambassador's son arrested in multi-million-dollar syndicate sting. The article details how the brilliant Marcus attempted to use his father's legacy as a cloak for his greed. It mentions that the funds have vanished, presumably swallowed by the black holes of the digital world. I know better. The Sovereign Justice Fund sent me an encrypted confirmation this morning. The 12 million is already being used to dismantle a trafficking hub in Eastern Europe. My son's greed is finally doing some good for the world. I reach into my pocket and pull out Martha's gold watch. I took it back from Marcus's dresser before I walked out that door for the last time. I traced the engraving on the back, always yours. I felt no guilt when I saw him in handcuffs, and I feel none now. Enabling a parasite is not an act of love. It is an act of weakness. I chose to be a father, but he chose to be a predator. In the end, I simply leveled the playing field. "The car is ready, sir," Merrick says, appearing at the doorway. He looks relaxed, a man enjoying a peaceful assignment for once. "Your granddaughter's flight lands in an hour. She's excited to see you." "Thank you, Merrick," I say, standing up. My joints feel lighter today. The Alpha isn't defined by the power he holds over others, but by the dignity he maintains for himself. I spent my life protecting nations. It was only right that I ended my career by protecting my own legacy. I take one last look at the azure horizon. Marcus thought he was the master of my fate, but he forgot that a diplomat's greatest weapon is patience. I am no longer a burden to be managed or a liability to be hidden. I am Victor, and I have finally come home. I tuck the watch into my pocket, ready to give it to the only person left in my family who understands the meaning of respect. As I walk toward the car, I don't look back. The past is a closed file, and the future is mine to write. If you love my story, please like this video and subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you have watched it from. This inspires us to share more such stories with you.